Hey there, today I want to talk about the top 10-ish DevOps certifications in 2024, and I'm going to start with the least important ones to the most important, but these are still all good, so I'm completely excluding the really terrible crap ones. Okay, so let's start. The least important ones on my list is Linux certs. So there's a number of Linux certs, and the first three that you see there are kind of, well, depends who you speak with, but they're roughly considered equal, and the Red Hat ones are considered sort of cut above and for more experienced sort of Linux sysadmins, that type of thing. Look, at the end of the day, right, for a DevOps role, you are considered that you need to have minimum Linux knowledge, but most companies are not going to look for a cert. So that's why I put this as the least important in my list, because you need Linux, and the cert might help a little bit, but in all likelihood it won't help all that much actually. And Linux is just one of those things where no company for DevOps needs a Linux expert, but they're just sort of expecting you to have average level. Just as a normal thing, they're going to expect you to have that. They'd be surprised, they'd be shocked if you don't have it, and they might even ask you a few questions to test you. Next on my list is a bunch of product specific, and many of these are quite new actually. So, for example, Istio Certified Associate, HashiCorp Vault Associate, Prometheus, Puppet. These are also down the lower important side of my list because they're not. I've never seen a single employer actually ask for these. Will they raise eyebrows if you have them? Probably not. So really, they're not all that important, but let's say, for example, that you have used HashiCorp Vault at maybe the last 3 places you've worked at, and you're actually pretty good at it. Then, yeah, you know what? To match your really good experience in HashiCorp Vault, it might be worth getting an associate level cert. It's saying, let's say that you are in the later stages of your career, you decided to specialize more in observability or monitoring, and really that's where your strength is, and you're actually weak in other areas because you've decided to focus on this area. Then you know what, it might be worth getting the Prometheus Certified Associate. Let's say you dedicated platform management, you might want to get this Istio cert. Let's say you love configuration management, you might want to get Puppet, and I think there's an Ansible cert as well. If you're dedicated to a particular specialism within DevOps, these certs might be interesting to you, but in general they're not really that important. I don't think people really care too much. Now we're getting on to the more useful ones, and these certified Kubernetes qualifications, they are highly respected because they're quite practical. So as you probably know, a lot of certs are quite theoretical, quite academic. However, these certs here actually test practical skills, and in the exam you'll be given typically environments that you have to use the command line kubectl commands to actually succeed. So these are highly respected. You got the 2 here, the CKA and the CKAD. I would actually, if you decide to go for one, I would actually sort of recommend getting the other one as well, because they do complement each other. Which one is better than the other? Difficult to say. I mean, administrator, originally you might say that's kind of more important for a DevOps person, but given that these days DevOps and devs is having some convergence, and as a DevOps professional you need to know about development, then you could arguably start with the CKAD first if you wanted to, but I recommend getting both. You might want to later on consider getting the CKS, that's a security qualification. I believe you need the CKA before you do that. I don't recommend getting all 3 up front or more and becoming a Kubestronaut who has all of them. I'm going to explain why later, but basically you want to, as soon as you have any of these 2 here, you want to back it up with at least intermediate level experience before you even consider going for the CKS. Otherwise you might end up looking like just somebody who doesn't have much real experience but has a whole bunch of certs. I'll explain that shortly. By the way, please, if you're enjoying this video, give it a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. We're growing and we'd really appreciate that. So continuing on now, I'm onto the cloud certs, and these are fairly important. It's unusual to be a DevOps engineer and not have exposure to the cloud. It can happen sometimes. for example, a financial industry which may decide some operations to focus only on on-prem, and you can be a great DevOps engineer and have a great career, but in general most people will be exposed to the cloud. And what I would say is, first of all, pick one cloud. I have another video on this, but don't bother going multi-cloud. It's really a waste of your time. Employers basically see you as good as your last position. So if you're currently doing Azure and your next role you're looking for is AWS, they're going to judge you and they're going to wonder why you don't have AWS as your most recent experience. So just pick one cloud and focus on that. That is my advice. And forget the foundational level certs. So it depends on which cloud it is, that they have different names. I think for AWS it's called Cloud Practitioner or something like that. Forget about those. Those are, I mean, by all means, if you want to, do the cert, but I wouldn't put it on my CV or resume. It kind of looks like a bit desperate, really, a bit try hard to put that on your resume. The only people who really should have that or should talk about it are non-technical staff like managers and non-technical people in a product management area of the business. But if you're an engineer, developer, or DevOps, then forget foundational certs. What you want is, the first one to get is typically it's an associate level architecture type cert. And so these are the big three clouds. I've mentioned the name of those certs here. You got AWS Solutions at the SAA, Azure Administrator Associate, and Google Cloud Associate Cloud Engineer, or also known as ACE. So get the Associate Architect one. That's typically the first one, and it will normally be about the whole range of services, and it is a bit of a memorization job, but that's just the way it is. Now after that, you've got two paths that you could take. You could take Professional, which is building on the associate level, and typically a lot harder and not that easy to pass. Or you could take, usually these clouds offer a DevOps track. And for the DevOps track, you usually need this associate level cert first anyway, and then you typically take another cert, like a developer type cert or something similar. And yeah, you need like 2 or 3 certs to get the DevOps track and complete that. And those are good to have. But I'm going to explain later, look, if you've got no cloud experience whatsoever, then by all means get the associate, but do not move on to pro or DevOps track without some real world experience. Or again, you're going to look like just some kind of cert king who's academic and can't actually do the job, and you don't want to give off that impression. I'll talk more about that again shortly. Now, what I consider actually to be the most important DevOps certification, and some people might be surprised by this, is actually Terraform Associate. So Terraform, DevOps, central to DevOps is creating deterministic infrastructure as code, and almost all companies are using Terraform for infrastructure as code. So it's super practical, this cert, and it really shows that you have a core DevOps competence. And it's not difficult to get this cert either, so it also makes for a great first level cert. And it builds on this cloud cert as well, because typically you'll be using Terraform in one of these 3 clouds. So actually these are both together, really. I would say that these are both the most important. Get the Terraform, it's super easy, the associate level, it's only a 1-hour exam, and pick up an associate level cloud cert, and they are the most important. After that, you can look at getting, for example, a CKA or maybe the CKAD. But Kubernetes, I know it's considered pretty sexy, and don't get me wrong, I love Kubernetes as a product, but you don't want to look, especially if you don't have any experience, like too much of just a cert king who can't actually do anything. I would actually advise holding back on doing CKA or CKAD until you've got at least 1 or 2 years worth of real world experience, in my opinion. Now I got 2 hot tips for you here with certs. The first one is, when they expire, you can just put a word after, leave it on your resume, and just call it lapsed or expired. I in general do not renew my certs. I don't really see the point, because I could learn something new. If I have to renew, for example, my AWS Associate cert, I basically got to cover 95% of the same stuff I learned before and forgot a lot of it, revise it, recover it again, spend quite a lot of hours doing that, do the cert again, and I'm just back to where I was before. I don't really have much more to show for it. And I could have spent that time learning about something new. So I don't recertify unless I have to, unless I'm depending on that. So that, if, for example, if you're going for a next level cert where you need that associate, then you might have to recertify. So otherwise I don't do it. My other tip is don't get too many certs. Like I said, you don't want to become a cert king. What I would say is match them one for one with real life experience. So here's an example, right? You can go left or right first, it doesn't matter. Let's say you've got no experience, then you start with a few beginner certs. But don't do any more certs until you've got at least junior level experience. And while you're at work with this experience, start studying for intermediate certs. Okay, but after that, don't go to advanced level until you've got mid-level experience. Then you can move on to advanced and, you know, eventually senior principal. You can also go the other way. You can start with no certs. You can be a junior. Pick up those beginner certs. At the very least, pick those up, beginner ones, preferably intermediate. Then you can move to mid-level. What you don't want to do is skip 2 levels. So, for example, you're a junior, and then you decide to do all these certs all the way up to advanced. I don't really think that's going to help you. And in fact, it can be worse the other way. So, well, not worse, but the same applies. For example, you can have just like hardly any certs, and then you go through junior, mid-level, you become a senior and a principal. Well, you know, I mean, that's okay. Probably at that stage you don't need any certs, but I would say it's probably a good idea to have some certs. You know, certs are not useless. I don't subscribe to this theory that certs are completely useless and that experience is always better. I subscribe to the theory that they're both good, but you need to do them in lockstep. Match them one for one. Don't skip far ahead on either side, and that will give you the best outcome. So look, I hope you enjoyed this video again. Please give it a like if you did. Subscribe to the channel. I will see you again soon. Thank you. Bye bye.